everyone for joining us this morning for what I am really looking forward to in terms of a talk. One of the things I look forward to most in our water issues seminars that we put together are talks from our GreenCorps members. We reserve a few spots during the summer each year now to hear from our GreenCorps members. When we give them a chance to talk about the kind of work that they're doing out there, that is always, well, to me, it's very inspiring and very interesting to see what they're doing. This morning, we're going to hear from Lizzie Boor, who graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth last year in 2020. And so she is well-versed in doing work in the midst of pandemic, which I have enormous respect for. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science and Geological Sciences, and she's currently serving with the Minnesota GreenCorps Community Readiness and Outreach Program at the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. And her plans, she tells us, is to go to the University of Minnesota to the Water Resources Science Program and focus on chemicals of emerging concern in septic wastewater treatment systems. This morning, she's going to talk about her work with the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, where she focused on adapting environmental communications programs while in a challenging year of COVID. She's going to go through several hybrid and virtual programs she's developed to engage citizens with their environment. Like I said, this is inspiring to me that somebody like Lizzie can do this kind of work remotely and talk about COVID in a positive way, saying that it's a force for communication, right? So with that, Lizzie, great to have you with us. Take it away.
All right, I'll just share my screen. We practiced this earlier. Okay, everyone can see? I assume, yes?
Looks good.
Yep, we're good.
Good. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Mark. As he said, I am a Minnesota GreenCorps member, and most of you must know what that is since large audience members are from the MPCA, but I'll just quickly explain for anybody who's not. Minnesota GreenCorps is an AmeriCorps program that's hosted through the MPCA. So I am picked out of a selection of people by the MPCA to be placed around Minnesota at a host site that has specific environmental needs. So some GreenCorps members work on air pollution and reduction, some work on recycling and organics. My specific area is community readiness and outreach. So it could be talking about anything that is an environmental need. My Watershed District, where I was placed, had a big need for chloride outreach. So that was one of my biggest focuses while I was working during my service term, which started in September and will be ending in August 16th. So this is a map of the Watershed District, 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, which is my host site. So a watershed, if you don't know, is an area of land that gathers water and sends it to a common source, or a common sink rather. So in this map, the sink is 9 Mile Creek. So all of this area of land drains to 9 Mile Creek right before it goes to the Minnesota River. And it's a government agency that regulates the water bodies there. So it does permitting, capital improvement projects. So if you're treating algae, that's run by the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District in this area. And so it's a legal boundary that doesn't follow cities' boundaries. So it includes parts of cities. So we have Minnetonka, Hopkins, Edina, Eden Prairie, Bloomington, and Richfield, but not all of cities. So it can be very confusing for citizens which watershed district they're in and whether they're actually in one. And so oftentimes we find that citizens don't even know what a watershed district is, and that was one of the battles that I recognized immediately when I started working here. And then when I started as a GreenCorps member, you have this base work plan of projects that you should complete by the end of your service term. And my original work plan was filled with what you would imagine community outreach events. So I would be directly talking to the public, going to schools and teaching about the water cycle, or doing macro invertebrate studies with high schoolers, or doing rain garden presentations. But all of that was kiboshed with the big COVID. When I entered GreenCorps, it was kind of unsteady ground. We didn't really know what the community readiness outreach group would be doing, if we could be doing anything at all. So I was thinking, what could I do to adapt my work plan so that I would still achieve my goals of introducing the community to the environment and ways they could help, and introducing the Watershed District to the community so they knew we were a resource for them, but not actually speaking to them directly. And so this was an obstacle that I overcame by developing programs that could be self-led, or I could demonstrate the program in a video so people could watch it and then replicate it at home. And that's the main way that I was able to engage with the public this year. And I would say these programs, they were very different from what the Watershed would do normally, but they were so successful and they take so little staff time that it's easy to maintain in future years and still maintain that outreach in that way. So that's really beneficial in these virtual formats. And this example, this Junior Watershed Explorer booklet, was one of the first projects that I took on. It's based off of the park rangers little Explorer booklets. So if you're familiar with those, the Junior Ranger Explorer program, that's what I based this off of. It's just an activity booklet that kids can take home with them and do the activities indoors and outdoors and become familiar with goals that I had in mind. So this booklet was focused on teaching kids what a watershed was, introducing them to aquatic invasive species, climate change, and groundwater conservation, and introducing it in a fun way where they would do activities outside or inside with their family. So they'd recognize, yes, this is fun, but these are some important messages that I can take away and teach my other friends or teach my other family members about. And it was very, very popular. We provided it in the mail if people requested it. It's a resource online, but the main audience member for it was school students. So the 4th grade classes have a water unit, and this really helped teachers in a time they needed virtual formats and fun things for students to do, but didn't have the time to dedicate to creating these like pretty dramatic booklets. I made this from scratch in Adobe InDesign, so this takes a lot of time, but it alleviated some time that teachers had to take in. So we had over 500 kids fill out this booklet, and when they complete it, they get a little Junior Watershed Explorer sticker and a bottle, and so they can remember about it and teach others. So it was a really cool program. It was so popular that little kids, kindergarten and under, were also trying to do it with their family members, and it was a bit of an obstacle for them to do just because it was a little jargony and the problems were a bit technical. There was some math in there and that was difficult for them. So taking that feedback, I made another edition for younger kids with a very focused idea of stormwater, which is a big cause for most watershed district because stormwater brings all of the pollution. And so it introduces things like the storm drains. So when a kid's walking around, they see, oh, a storm drain, that takes water to our local lakes and creeks, and it brings pollutants with it. And it has little fun activities like, oh, if I pour water on some cement and pour water on some grass, what happens? The water on the cement doesn't soak in. And so it's these concepts that are fun for kids to participate in, but hit home the big concepts that we want them to remember for environmental advocacy, because hitting kids young when they can then hit more people in their lifetime with environmental messages is very important. And this program was awesome for that. All right, so Citizen Salt Watch was another big program. I mentioned one of my main work plan goals was to teach about chloride in my watershed district. That's because the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District is impaired for chloride. The Citizen Salt Watch is based off of an Isaac Walton League program that is across the nation. If you're not familiar with it, it's just a citizen science program that sends out these test kits in the left corner here. You put the strip in a lake or stream that's near you. It'll move up the test strip with a number saying this is the parts per million chloride in this body of water. Take a picture of that with a postcard and send it into the Isaac Walton League, and they get this big database of all of the recordings in the entire United States for the entire year of chloride. It's a great movement. If you aren't even in our watershed district, you can be a part of it. But we created our own little specific one so that the volunteering would be associated with the watershed district, so they'd become more familiar with us. And I also adapted the program a little bit from what the original one was. So the Watershed District already has a pretty extensive chloride monitoring program with their engineers. They do all of the lakes and the creek pretty regularly on a weekly basis because we're impaired with chloride. The database is extensive. We know we have a problem, but I wanted to involve the public with the problem so it would become more conscious in their minds. And so I thought, what could they do that would add to our database, but also get them involved with this citizen science program? That's pretty fun, and they would go outside, maybe take a friend, talk about it. And I decided, testing stormwater might be fun to see these chloride hotspots. Maybe some neighborhoods are really salting the roads a lot harder than others, and we can see it right away at the source instead of, oh, the salt got in the lakes, but we don't really know where the salt came from. So I enlisted a bunch of our volunteers, and these dots here in this GIF show how bad the chloride was in each of these locations. And I was thinking maybe residential areas might be less polluted than the commercial areas, which some volunteers had measured, but you can see in January, February, it's pretty much all red chronic toxicity levels of salt, which makes sense because we were testing just plain old street runoff, so it was pretty much salt and water, and that's all they were testing. But you can tell in March we were already getting some safe levels, and that's because this year in March it started to rain, and so the rain, once it flushed out the salt, the roads were clear again, and that's why we were getting those green readings. The strips that we used went up to 600 parts per million ppm, but I think we would want some higher reading ones next year. This is a pilot, so we are going to continue into next year, and we'd like some higher reading ones just so we can differentiate them more. The strips this year pretty much all maxed out with their chloride readings, which was more than we expected, but good to know. And getting in these results, it's pretty sad. The volunteers, I showed them this map and they're like, oh, well, that's sad. What can we do about it? We didn't want to reemphasize that we have a big salt problem and then be like, meh. So I created a follow-up program that have a 5-mile radius around each dot, and we are sending out postcards this winter to both the residential audiences, which is this postcard, and then the commercial audiences saying, you are a chloride hotspot. It's a letter from us and the city that they're in. So it's more credible to them than just a watershed district they don't know. They are familiar with the city logo. So your chloride hotspot, 9 Mile Creek is impaired with chloride. There are some actions that you can do to help, and it includes either taking the smart salting training that the MPCA does or doing individual actions as a residential level. So we're hoping this will have some more environmental outreach. for those communities and bring awareness, but also show the volunteers that we were enlisting that we are doing something about the salt issue in 9 Mile Creek. So that's a very fun program, and it's pilot. This was the first year of doing it, so there are a bunch of hiccups, especially with using the Water Reporter app, which was like sending in the actual readings. A lot of the older audiences had some trouble with that, so I had to create some additional videos that would walk through how to do it. But once I had those base things done, it was easier. This DIY water audit is another program. It's in response to our watershed managers wanting more response to groundwater conservation. And it's very timely. I did this before we are in a drought, but now we see we are in a very big drought, and people can use this resource. It explains what a water audit is, and then goes through all of the actions that you can take to improve your water consumption. That's either finding leaks in your house, or improving your actions, or changing out your fixtures so that they're more they use less water. And then I have some of those, again, additional videos I find is very helpful, showing people how someone else has done it so they can follow visually how to do it rather than reading. And this program was fun too because it had a water timer, shower head, faucet aerator kind of incentive to do the program. If you did all of the checklist, you would get them for free. So it emphasized doing the water audit, and then yay, you get a prize. That's often how we work here, because if we say free things online, people get excited, and that's I do too. Adopt a Creek is a program that hasn't been launched yet. I thought of it maybe in March, right when I was seeing all of this trash be released from the creek. I was walking around taking pictures to get some more pictures for a story map I was creating for the Watershed District, and there was lots of water bottles and stuff floating in the creek, and if I lived in the Creek Watershed District, saw the creek for the first time, I wouldn't really want to be associated with it because it was so dirty. And the cities that had all the trash don't have the staff to keep it clean. So I said, this is a very easy program to enlist volunteers for, cleaning up creek for a couple days. And it looks great for months afterwards, because that's the whole winter's worth of buildup of trash that I was looking at. So it was an easy enough solution with GIS, which I have background in school, to find all of the public land that was on the creek property, section it out to creek breaches that were approachable, that people could walk on safely, and grab the trash and submit it. So this is a little interactive map online on our website where you can click a breach, adopt it for that spring, and pledge to clean up all of the trash on it, and then send in how many bags you collected to the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, so we can get some data on it, and then also recognize the volunteers for their hard work. And trash is a big problem in most waters, and this is an easy solution and a great way to get our citizens involved. And I really enjoyed putting it into a map view, because people are visual creatures, and it's easier to see where you're going to pick up if you can look on it on a map. And then this GIS program, you can reserve that breach of creek just like you would reserve a ticket at a concert. It's pretty cool. And I've been mentioning over and over again, interacting with people is really hard when you're in a pandemic. And oftentimes they might start a program that I created, but it's really hard to follow, or it's just not their learning style. So I'd create these videos for them to follow along with. So it's just an additional way you can learn a concept. And I find, especially with younger generations, they don't have the attention span to read a whole paper, but watching a video is really easy. So I've created over 30 videos now on different topics, like weeding maintenance for rain gardens, just understanding what a BMP is, how to how to test your soil for nutrients, so you know what fertilizer to use if you're going to use fertilizer at all. And with all those groundwater audits, I also had walkthroughs with some volunteers on how they went through the groundwater audit. And so I find the videos are very helpful, and a lot of good feedback from some of our volunteers that these videos were easier to follow than some of our other older materials that were more traditional for the Watershed District. And so I think going forward, we're investing more in video, like a drone, some tripod stands, and I think videos are the way of the future. So if you're not on YouTube, it's probably the way to go. Finally, one of the really fun programs that I started with when working at the Watershed District is this seed propagation lab. Growing up, I grew up on a sustainable vegetable farm, so I'm really comfortable digging around in the dirt. And there was a unused closet at our Watershed District within our greenhouse, and we decided to make it into a seed propagation lab for natives. So we gathered all of these seeds in fall when all of the seed heads were dry and kept them over winter. I have more pictures of that process. So I kept all these seeds in a fridge. It's called stratifying your seeds. The fridge facilitates, or rather synthesizes, a wintering period for the seeds, and sometimes seeds need multiple wintering periods, so you turn it cold, turn it hot, turn it cold again to make them think they've gone through several instances of a winter before the native seed will germinate. I tried several natives, and some were easier than others. You can see all of these seeds types that we gathered. The most successful natives that we grew were coneflower, monarda, the anise hyssop was pretty successful, and little blue stem was pretty easy as well. I pretty much cold stratified them once, didn't even need to add water to them, and laid them atop the dirt, didn't stir them in, and they already grew. So it was a very fun program. I started growing them in February. This is an example of me demonstrating how to do a project. So I went through all of the errors and troubleshooted all of the issues that I would go through when planting these seeds, so that the people who do it next won't have to. And so it's an easier process and a more fun process for them. So in August 4th or 6th, I'm hosting a native seed propagation class at the office. It'll be our second in-person event this year. And I'm just going to go through our site, talk about how you would harvest the seeds, how you sift the seeds out of their materials, plant them, because natives are a great water quality improving plant. They have really deep roots, so they take in the water really deeply before it goes into our lakes and creeks, and it's called pre-treating if you have a buffer that way. So you don't have to, or you don't allow those storm water to go to the lakes and creeks. You stop it with these natives who are really digging in the water deep before it goes to the lakes and creeks. It's a great program, and I really hope a lot of people find fun in it, because you can buy little natives from nurseries. It's cheaper to do it this way, but it's a lot more work to do it this way, but I think it's a lot more satisfying. I planted 400 plants at the property this year, and it was a lot of fun, and I can now go back there every year and point at these plants and say, these are the ones that I planted. And that's just great fun. And of course, we had the Zoom presentations that everyone had. It's the fastest way to inform people about things, I think. We have a lot of Zoom fatigue, but the audience that really responds well to Zoom is high school students, the middle school students that have now absorbed it so well into their education that that's the way they learn now, I've noticed. And so I don't think Zoom is going away anytime soon. I think, well, we're on WebEx now. It's faster to inform people. You don't have to be in the same place. And this example, chloride in 9 Mile Creek, I wouldn't have reached out to these students because they weren't in our watershed district, but they had asked to learn about it. And since I didn't have to travel anywhere, it only takes 10 minutes to talk about chloride to high school students in a very brief, shallow explanation of it. And then these students became advocates of chloride pollution when none of them had known that chloride was a problem to begin with. So Zoom, though there's some like anxiety when the word is said, is a very powerful tool, and I will see more of it in the future for sure. So that is my presentation. I can send out an email to, I see a lot of questions about getting these resources. I can send out an email with links to them, but are there any questions?
Well, I mentioned to people, I think Brooke is going to moderate the questioning here. I mentioned at the start of your presentation, Lizzie, that I thought it was inspiring to hear what GreenCorps members have been doing out there. To that, I would add absolutely awe-inspiring what you have accomplished over the past year. It is amazing what you have done. I really, really enjoyed what you had to say about your talks. It's just amazing what you've been able to do.
Thank you. I say thank you for all of the GreenCorps members.
So it looks like, yep, Lizzie, we do have a question about where, if these materials that you have created are available. I know one of them, how to set up the citizen monitoring program you shared with me. It is on my to-do list, which is unfortunately longer than I can manage at the moment, but it is on my list to get that posted on the MPCA's website because you guys gave us permission to share that. So we'll definitely be putting that kind of how to create that program on our website. In the meantime, though, if they want just some of the other materials, is that on the 9 Mile Creek's website or?
Yeah, they are on the 9 Mile Creek website. You'd have to search their specific name and look around a bit, but I could send an email to one of you two with the direct links so it wouldn't take so long for everyone, if that is preferred.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And then there was another question about and I don't know if you'll know this or not, Lizzie, but if 9 Mile Creek has Minnesota water steward volunteers that are part of your program and that can utilize and maybe start offering, offering some of these programs in the watershed.
Yeah, we have had watershed stewards in the past. This year during COVID, the program was just kind of dropped. And the last graduates of the program were fall 2020, I think. Whether they're starting up the program or not, again, I'm uncertain. I know that it's changed a little bit. So, and there was debate whether they're going to start it again, but volunteers in general are encouraged. Just reach out.
Yeah, so is there, that would be a good audience if you're willing to share some of the materials that you have created with that email list.
Yeah.
I know that you could almost just ask Sue. I know Sue is an active member on that list, so she could maybe share that or a link to let folks know about this resource. And an idea that after I'm hearing about all these great materials, and I know there's a lot of other GreenCorps members who created some great materials, is it'd be great to have a little section of our website. And of course, I only have control over the chloride one, but can say, here's all these great chloride programs and materials that our GreenCorps members have kind of created over the last couple of years. So that would be an interesting thing, I think, to share with folks, because you guys do usually always create some pretty great work and some resources. So I'm just scrolling through the comments here. We got more compliments for you, Lizzie, on the great work that you did. So a little shout out from
I've got
Karen.
a little bit of a question here. I was really interested in the coloring book you put together, for kids. I
Mhm.
thought that was great. I just really wanted to do it myself, actually. It looked very fun, and I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about your ideas on putting that together and how you were able to get it to kids to engage them on it. I mean, was that all online, or were you able to distribute that, in like hard copy to groups or something, or how did you go about that?
A good chunk of them were mailed out. We just had people sign up for them on Woohoo, and it would come in and we'd mail them out, which is pretty expensive. Um, but then the other good chunk of it, I reached out to school teachers. We have a few contacts with schools, but I had talked to a few other ones, Spanish immersion schools, which we hadn't talked to before, and some other schools that had popped up, and they were really interested. I was surprised with the feedback because, like I said, they had a need for some sort of virtual interaction, and doing a water unit is typically something classes would go do outside together. They go splash around the creek or whatever looking for bugs, but they couldn't do that this year. And so the response for a virtual format of something they could do together was big, and there were 6 different schools with the 4th grades that wanted those booklets, and I was excited about the feedback. That was one of the first programs I did, and it felt like I was really getting out there with the kids, even though I wasn't. Brooke, you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a question in the Q&A. Thank you, Mike, for pointing that out to me. It's from Mike. You mentioned people seem more aware of their city than their watershed district. That's interesting, since I assume most area residents are aware of the creek. The various activities you discussed are great. I'm wondering if you have some ideas for programs or activities that directly connect residents to the creek, like the Adopt a Creek program.
Yeah, that is a very big issue. I didn't know what a watershed district was till I got placed in this position. I grew up in a rural part of Minnesota, and watershed districts aren't everywhere. So when I moved here, it was news to me. So I imagine it's news to a lot of people in that way. And then when we do projects like capital improvement projects, it has our name on it, but it also has the city's name on it. So I think a lot of times when like aluminum treatments on a lake are being done, they associate it with the city doing it instead of 9 Mile Creek doing it, though we're usually the ones funding it. So there's that obstacle, but yeah, any program that you can say, oh, this is the watershed district, this is what we do, over and over again, we are slowly getting more people to understand what we are and who we are. We went to a farmer's market last weekend, maybe, talking to people, and I was surprised. There were a lot of people that knew who we were in Bloomington because we've been doing some projects there beyond education and outreach, and really emphasizing that it was a 9 Mile Creek project more than a City of Bloomington project. So we get both positive and negative feedback from that, but I'm glad people are understanding that we're a local government and a resource. But yeah, introducing it at schools at a young age too, that not a watershed district is a thing, and Boy Scout troops now interact with us doing buckthorn removals and things like that. So I think introducing at a young age is very, very important.
Great, thanks, Lizzie. And we do have a few more comments and questions in the chat. Again, another compliment on your great work here from Matt. And he's wondering about your thoughts on connecting your chloride monitoring effort to the AdoptADrain program.
Connecting chloride to AdoptADrain, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, AdoptADrain is like the go-to thing for Another issue I've come across too as a Watershed District employee and trying to find things that people can do is we often have resources for homeowners, but not for apartment dwellers. Um, and so Adopt a Creek and Citizen Salt Watch were great programs because they are something that you can do as an apartment dweller and still feel like you're adding to the program. But that's a great idea to combine the two because there are a bunch of AdoptADrain volunteers already. And if they're outside already doing stormwater sort of related things, can continue the program into winter. That's a great idea. I think we may have a list of the volunteers for AdoptADrain too, so shout out to whoever thought of that.
Yeah, that was Matt Linden. That is a great idea. And I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, we heard from a GreenCorps member up in, I think, Anoka, that had done some really great work with the AdoptADrain program in their community and had created some resources and a web platform. And so yeah, that's a great idea. Another idea that I have heard of is this Isaac Walton League Salt Watch program is really fantastic. For those of you who have not heard about it, we were able to get some kits dedicated to MPCA last year. Unfortunately, we're not able to continue that effort or that partnership anymore. But it's a fantastic, those little test strips work great, actually. They're surprisingly accurate with the chloride measurements, and there's so many different ways that can be used. So we've got 9 Mile using it for doing stormwater. Coon Creek has a similar kind of partnership, but they're actually doing in-stream measurements. I know that I think it was Hennepin County's wetland evaluation program is actually going to incorporate the test strips. So when they send out their volunteers to do the macroinvertebrate and the evaluation of the wetland, they're going to get chloride test strips included in part of that too. And I know there's some opportunities to get more schools, high schoolers, that they are going to go out and do, other work in the stream or the lakes or wetlands to get some of these test strips through the Isaac Walton League program. So was exciting to have Lizzie work on that and expand that. We have another comment here from Melissa about connecting with the watershed, but can only imagine how appreciative the Watershed District staff are with your developments and progress. Awareness often leads to pride action, especially on this topic. So just another shout out to the great work you've been doing. And that is important, that connection with the residents and the district, because they're less likely to get involved and do much if they don't even know it exists. So what else? Do we have any other questions or comments out there? And you guys can feel free to unmute yourselves too if you want to just ask Lizzie your question or shower her with more compliments.
Good chunk of my service year too has been expanding social media. It's not my forte, nor really my place of enjoyment, the interwebs, but that also is the way of the future, I think, because a lot of our feedback from public comment comes through Twitter and through Instagram now, and not through email. So a lot of the younger audience that we interact with too is through Instagram and not really through Facebook or for email. So reaching out those different audiences, branching out to different social media platforms, I think is important now. I think we might have to be adding TikTok soon.
Yes, I think we should. We should create some TikToks on all these environmental issues because that's where all the kids, all the young generation is on there. So let's create some TikTok. I mean, that means some of us are going to have to dance and have our messaging kind of hidden in our dance moves somehow. But yeah, that's a good point, that you got to keep up with where people are going, and that is definitely the trend. We have a question from Paul here wondering if 9 Mile Creek is actually 9 miles long.
It is not 9 miles long. It is 9 miles from Fort Snelling. So when the people were walking towards Fort Snelling, they hit 9 Mile Creek. They know they're 9 miles away.
So how long is it actually?
I think it's like 15 miles. It's not much longer, but But
And
it also has
COVID
it has two forks, to a north and a south.
Just taking off a little bit on what you were talking about earlier about TikTok and all of these online things. I have been increasingly impressed, I guess, with this year of COVID, that kicked off your talk, on actually how well our seminar series have gone, reaching people. I think that maybe we weren't reaching before, virtually instead of in real time in room 100 at the MPCA. And I'm kind of wondering, do you think, this is your chance to, kind of talk about this. Do you think it's with your year of finishing up your degree virtually at UMD and the extraordinary work you've done over the past year with GreenCorps, I'm kind of wondering if you think the virtual outreach might be even more effective than, the in-person efforts that, I think many of us are more accustomed with. Do you think that's maybe where we should be putting more of our emphasis after the work you've been doing?
I think virtual engagement is very powerful. In my experience as a student in learning in a virtual environment, it's hard because you don't have that one-on-one interaction time with the teacher. I would say it can be done very well. I would hope that teachers have gotten very good at it now that it's been almost 2 years maybe for some people doing virtual format. And I think it's something that should be continued because there are a lot of students that don't get good education because they aren't reached by some school district. They have to homeschool or they don't get little school at all. So it's something that should be continued. Whether it's good for all students is debatable. And I think there's value to being in person for doing interpersonal skills and things like that. But for meetings like this, I think virtual is perfectly acceptable. I think you're right. You're probably reaching a lot more people this way.
I'm going to ask you, do you think our agency should be doing more of it? Should we be doing more virtual stuff in a more concerted kind of way than we are? Do you think there's more room for that?
I think so, yeah. I have been more engaged with the MPCA than I ever have, not because I'm a GreenCorps member, but because you offer a lot more virtual listening into the commissioners' talks even I would never do without the virtual meetings of it.
All right, well, I am not seeing any additional comments or questions in the chat or the Q&A. So with that, another.
Oh, I've been asked what's next for me.
Oh, there you go. What's next for you?
I'm going to the University of Minnesota for Water Resources Science degree and master's program. I'm doing a fellowship with Dr. Sarah Hager, doing chemicals of emergent concern in septic sites across the state. Some of it's funded by the MPCA, so that's fun. And I'll also be on still part-time with the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, continuing some of the programs that I started here.
Yeah, that's a great. We're excited for Lizzie. I was hoping that maybe we could find a spot here at MPCA for her, but she's going to go get her master's and maybe she'll come back. Maybe after she's done with that, we can convince her to come work at MPCA to make
I was going to say it would be a real disappointment to me if you didn't end up at the MPCA. We could certainly use your skills.
And you don't want to disappoint Mark, Lizzie. So.
Yeah.
So, well, it has been a pleasure. I had the pleasure of working closely. I kind of pseudo mentor the chloride GreenCorps members every year, and we met. We had regular meetings scheduled, so I had the opportunity to get to know several of the GreenCorps members. But I was actually Lizzie's mentor this year. So, for those of you who have never been a GreenCorps member, I'm going to go ahead and make a plug here that it's really a great use of your time. I think that you benefit just as much as the GreenCorps member benefits. It's not a huge time commitment. you know, and especially when, you know, you got someone like Lizzie who's just off doing all this great work, like she hardly needed anything from me. So, but it was just great to kind of be able to tag along a little bit on her journey and see some of the work she was doing and help kind of be a part of that. So if you are interested in being a GreenCorps member, who do we have out there? Any topic leads who are looking for GreenCorps members? I think I see Erin Driscoll out there. She, I know in the past was. But just let the GreenCorps program know if you would like to be a mentor. And I highly encourage everyone to get a little more involved in that program because I think it's a benefit to everybody. It's not just for the GreenCorps member. I think I've benefited and I've been happy to be Lizzie's mentor this past year.
Yeah, Brooke, this is Erin. I just thank you. And Lizzie, wonderful presentation, by the way. Just was very impressed. You've done phenomenal work. But yeah, as Brooke was saying, we're definitely looking for mentors for this coming year. It's a very small investment of time, and it makes a huge difference being in connection with GreenCorps members and kind of following along with things that they're learning and doing, and it's very exciting. So it's really fun, and encourage anybody who can put a little bit of time into it to be a mentor. You can contact me or contact one of the GreenCorps program staff, like Christina Valella and others. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, it's been a great talk here today. It's been a pleasure getting to see the full amount of work you did, Lizzie. And thanks everyone for joining us, for being part of today's talk. And we have another one. Mark, what is the date? August?
You caught me off guard.
Yeah, or Katie.
It is the second week in August, whatever that date is.
August 12th. August 12th, we've got the City of Rochester and our last GreenCorps member, Allison, who will be presenting the work that she did with the City of Rochester. So please join us August 12th to hear from our last GreenCorps member presentation for the year as they get done in August. So we won't, we'll have a new batch of GreenCorps members starting in September, but please join us August 12th to hear from Allison. And thanks again, Lizzie, for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today and to share your amazing work with us.
Yeah, great talk, Lizzie. Really good. Thanks for joining us this morning. It was really fun to hear about what you've been doing.
Yes, good talking. I enjoyed sharing my work.
Yeah, good luck in your studies too.
Thank you.
Enjoy it. Yeah, good.